Hello, everybody. With this presentation, we are going to talk about intercultural studies, providing you with a theoretical background about what interculturality means and what means to understand interculturality in essentialist and in non-essentialist terms. So, in this short screencast, you will know some basic information about essentialist and non-essentialist approaches towards interculturality. You will go into depth about the issue of intercultures at the plural as ad hoc creations, and you will know some basic information about dynamics of co-constructing intercultures in light of some of the most recent research. So, as you all might know, there is a basic differentiation about the way interculturality and intercultural studies conceive cultures in general and intercultural encounters. One is the essentialist approach, according to which a language tends to be coinciding with a culture, and culture is therefore essentialized and hyper-generalized or hyper-simplified in order to explain complex phenomena and processes. In these cases, it is very easy to see that generalization and also stereotypical views of cultures are presented in order to give an overview of cultural models. But of course, in most cases, this overview is the result of an overgeneralization of cultures. On the other hand, there is another approach, which is the non-essentialist one, according to which no hypergeneralization is provided, but conversely, culture is constructed in specific contexts, so the stress is not on the core component of cultures and intercultural encounters, rather it is on the situational dimension of intercultural encounters. So, culture is co-constructed, it is negotiated, it is commodified by the interactants in their intercultural encounters. So cultural models are conceived not only in their background dimension, but also and most of all in their situational dimension. As you all might know, there have been some different conceptions of culture in general, which have inspired different perspectives towards interculturality in intercultural studies across the world. One of the most famous ones is the view of Zygmunt Bauman, according to which culture can be understood in three dimensions: culture as concept, culture as structure, and culture as praxis. Zygmunt Bauman, who is one of the most influential philosophers and sociologists in the 20th century and also in part of the 21st century, therefore understands culture not only as a basic concept or just as a structure, as anthropologists tend to do, but also as a praxis, so as a series of institutionalized praxis within a society. And there is also a very original reflection about the difference between the concept of difference, which the concept of a cultural difference is based on, and the concept of gap. This reflection is made by François Julien, who is a philosopher and a sinologist, a very influential one, not only in France, but all over the world, who differentiates the concept of cultural differences with that of cultural gaps, pointing on the fact that cultural difference operates in the field of distinction, and for this reason it tends to imply classification, while cultural gap, implies an exploration and a possible way to let a third space and a common ground emerge between two cultural models and between two interactants in an intercultural encounter. So according to the way of François Julien, it is much more productive to talk about gap, cultural gap, rather than talking about cultural differences. Between cultural differences are static and gap is dynamic, and it is able to create some common grounds between cultures. And it is also very important to stress the point on the fact that several scholars all over the world have paid attention about the ways to decentralize, westernized concept of interculturality. So it is very important to understand that most of the intercultural studies carried out so far have been produced in Western countries, but despite that, a few scholars have pointed out that, of course, interculturality has to be understood also beyond Occidentalism and Orientalism, as Mashart, Dervin, and Gao did in 2016 in their book, edited volume, Intercultural Masquerade. And also some other scholars question that some of the labels according to which we construct the concept of interculturality and we construct intercultural studies and also all the concepts belonging to intercultural studies are Western-centered, and they need to be more neutral and more respectful to other civilizations and mainstream cultural models. It is not a case that Shi Xu, which is a Chinese scholar, pointed out that most of the labels according to which we construct interculturality belong to Western traditions, and he calls for a renewal of these labeling processes, taking into consideration other civilization belonging to the global south, but specifically in his case also belonging to Asia, Eastern Asia, and China most of all. Another very important issue, I think, is the conception of intercultures at the plural, as Ketchkes, which is a scholar working in the USA, proposes through his definition of the intercultures at the plural. Intercultures at the plural are ad hoc creations. They are produced in a communicative process in which cultural norms and models brought into the interaction from prior experience of interlocutors blend with features created ad hoc in a synergetic way. So according to the view of Ketchkes, the result is an intercultural discourse where transformation of knowledge is possible through co-construction of a common ground. So the emphasis is not more on transmission, but it is much more on transformation, which is very, very important, especially in relation with what we said about non-essentialist approaches. So according to what we said so far, we can see that there are some further issues and concepts regarding the co-construction of intercultures at the plural. And of course, the concept of context plays a very, very important role, as well as the concept of common ground, which are, of course, commodified, both of them, and negotiated in each moment in which intercultural communication may occur. So the situational dimension, once again, is very important to shape and reshape the context and the common ground between interlocutors. It is important also to take into consideration the concept of third spaces proposed by Kramsch and Uryu since 2012, because third spaces are the result of the commodification of the common grounds. So third spaces are in a certain way the result of this dynamic part of intercultural encounters. And of course, we can ask ourselves some questions about the meaning of cultural identity, whether it is possible to talk about cultural identity or whether it is stereotypical label, as Julien tends to question, and if it's possible to talk about cultural identity in a dynamic way and not just in a core dimension and in a static way. So I remind you that if you want to know something more about interculturality and specifically about non-essentialist approaches in multilingual education, please don't forget to watch the screencast Interculturality and Multilingual Education, from which you can learn a lot about the intertwining point between non-essentialist intercultural approaches and multilingual educational settings. So thank you very much.